Welcome to On the Brink, a fresh lens to take you and your business to new heights. Today, we're going to introduce a theme called New Times, New Strategies, and Managing Change. This is a time where you and your organization are trying to adapt to changing times. And our job is to help you do that. So let me tell you about what we're going to be doing during this webinar. First, I want to help you understand the pain of change. Why is it so difficult? You know the statement that people aren't adverse to change, they just don't want to be changed themselves. We're going to talk a lot about how the brain hates change and what you can do about it. The second thing we're going to talk about is the building blocks that you're going to need to change people, the way they see, feel, and think, and ultimately their culture. This is important because unless we see and experience something and feel it, remember we decide with the heart that's connected to the head, they aren't really separate. It's all part of the same function. We can't even think about things. So we'll talk a lot about the stories in our head and how that keeps us from wanting to change and doing so. And then I'm going to show you a methodology that we've developed based on a lot of good research that we've pulled together into what we call change mapping. If you think of change a little like a Google map, you need a destination and a path to get there, and a map along the way to make sure you're on the right course. So that's what we're going to be doing during this webinar. Join me. First, I truly believe Bob Dylan was in the right time and ahead of his time, but the 1960s were times where we were changing, and now we are as well. And this isn't little changes, this is fast. So as you're thinking about managing change and a time of fast-moving change, I want you to think about what makes you glad, sad, and mad about it. Those are important words. Remember, we buy with the heart, we make decisions with how it feels, and then we decide here. So as you're thinking about this whole process of managing change, give it some thought, because if you can tell yourself what makes you glad and how you feel sad about it, and what makes you mad, you'll begin to understand the challenges that you have as well as that of your organization. Now, for many of you who are watching this webinar, we asked you to take a culturetalk.com archetype survey, and I hope you have. There are 12 Jungian archetypes, and they capture the essence of our humans. And we've known about them for a long time, but Carl Jung really put them into categories that could make sense for us. If you've done it, terrific. If not, culturetalk.com, look at archetypes, and at the bottom of the page, there's a free survey you can take for yourself. And what you'll discover is the essence of who you are. This isn't inconsequential. Are you, like I am, an explorer who's always looking for what's coming new? Who likes things that are vacuums and not well established? Or are you a sage, an academic perhaps, or somebody who really likes to read and study and learn and know more? Are you perhaps a ruler? I have a client and he took the archetype and he came out as a very strong leader, ruler, where controls are really what matters. Caregivers are very comforting and very nourishing and very emotionally attached to people and care about them. The others also do, but in different ways. I like the regular guy. The regular guy is every boy, every man, every boy, every girl, everyone who wants to belong to others. And their strengths are different because they really want to be part of the group or their team. There's always a jester who wants to crack jokes and make people happy, and that's perfectly good, like the lover. And they connect to others very strongly. And then there are those who leave a mark, the magician, the outlaw, and the hero, all of whom are really approaching you and life very differently than perhaps the explorer and the sage are. What's very interesting about these archetypes is once you identify what you are, you might want to identify what your team is. What kind of mix of people do you have? What kind of cultures do they like? And then take a look at this chart about the type of company there are that match the archetypes. I love the fact that IKEA is everyman's. Belonging is very important to them. Or perhaps Disney is very innocent and full of safety and concern. Google is a sage. You get every answer to every question off of Google. Lego is a creator. Johnny Walker is a ruler. Johnson & Johnson are caregivers. They've each adopted a stereotype, an archetype, and that is very much in the human zone. And the people who work there may not all duplicate that archetype, but they understand what the core values of that culture are. Now, part of the challenges that you're facing is that you have generations who are changed, different. There are 74 million boomers who are 50 to 70 and are retiring by a lot. And they are beginning to look at the next stage of their lives in very different ways than they might have all along through the whole generation that has grown up. But boomers really crafted the America that is today in a very deliberate fashion. And those boomers did wonderful things. They filled malls with people walking to shop. And they thought about buying jewelry in jewelry stores. And doctors, they think about taking call at all hours of the day and night and being available when you need them and working hard for their pensions. There are really interesting observations about how the boomers are moving into the next phase of their life. We've had companies call us and say, boomers are a main audience who buy our paint, but they're not buying it anymore. And they are the main people who used to come to our hotel, but they're not coming anymore. And so they are going through the next stage in their lives where as they look at retirement, the resources they have, and for many people, they're not many, are going to be stretched thin. And some of them in their 50s and 60s are starting businesses all over again, some out of passion and some out of purpose. Following them are the 65 million Gen Xers. They are young, very bright, very energized, and very different from boomers in many ways, similar to them. Often they are the glue between the boomer and the Gen Y, or the millennials right behind them. We had anesthesiologists who had a hard time because the young Gen Ys wanted to work 9 to 5 and never take call, and the boomers always took call. That's what they had to do. And the poor Gen Xers in the middle had to translate between them. They are very different because very often they're managing up the boomers and down the Gen Ys, and they have to almost translate the conversation in different ways. Then we have 83 million Gen Ys. They are moving into those 30-year-olds. A couple of things that we know: they have lots of college debt. They've grown up really using the computer, and they've grown up really keen to how their mobile phones connect them. They have no relationship with the doctors, for example, but the boomers have deep relationships with doctors. The Gen Ys often aren't getting married, but are living together. And they're not buying houses, they're renting. And they're going on a lot of trips. Travel is hot for them. It's a very interesting personality, and they all aren't the same, but the talent asset gentleman from GM said they're great to hire, and they last 2.5 years. And please, can't you get them to stay a little longer? They're going to have 16 careers before they retire, and he's not alone. And then we have the Gen Zs who are coming through, 60 million of them. We don't know what age they start, but all of our college clients are seeing them arrive now. So on the one hand, once you understand who you are as an archetype, once you understand what your company is like archetypically, then you have to take a look at the generations that are beginning to change dramatically. By 2020, half the workforce are going to be Gen Ys. And those Gen Zs have an 8-second attention span. Now, I'm emphasizing this to you because if you're going to change your organization, you need to understand what you have to work with, because it isn't simply, I have people who have to change. You have a lot of different variables affecting who they are and how they're going to see what you're looking for, feel it, and begin to think about it. This chart came out of a Harvard Business article, and I just thought it captured it so well. This is the time of the great accelerator. In the past, companies were innovative, people were early adopters, they may have been early majority, then they may have been the late majority and the laggards. You have to remember we had Blockbuster, who didn't really recognize Netflix was a challenge at all. They thought that Apple was or Walmart was. They missed the whole boat, and now they don't exist. Kodak didn't think digital mattered. And guess what? They had it, but they also had a Brownie camera for 70 years. It didn't matter either. And then what about Blackberries? We all had Blackberries. Now nobody has Blackberries, although I had one client not long ago who still had his. The times are changing like the red graph on here. We have a lot of emerging, surging, and purging. Now, that is extremely fast moving and requires a different nimble and agility for us to change and adapt, because what's hot today isn't going to be hot tomorrow. And if your company always did it this way, and your staff would tell me that's the way we do it, it may no longer be relevant, valuable, needed, and the world may be changing all around you, and you're not even seeing it. So if the times are changing, as John Dillon said, and you have to change, I bet you're wondering, how do I do this? Why is it so hard? This graph here came out of Thomas Friedman's book, Thank You for Being Late. And it shows this technology moving much faster than human adaptability. It just is. However, we've always adapted, and technology always seems to have run faster. Remember the Luddites in England who burned all the factories because they were replacing them when they could do perfectly fine before, and now the factory was going to make the fabrics much faster, and the wool would be produced much more easily. This is not new, but it is new for you. So why is it so hard? First, you have to agree that your business, in order for it to survive, is going to have to evolve. Exactly how, we're not sure. For it to evolve, you're going to have to know what to change, how to change it, what's going to work. How can we get the risks out of change? How can we get people to embrace it? Third point, who you are is going to influence how you see the future. Let me say that again. I asked you to take a look at your archetype and that of your company. This is going to influence very strongly how you're going to respond to the changes, as will affect everybody who works with you, even your clients. And then we would urge you to think about this as a change management strategy. A change management model, the success of change comes to nothing more than hope or luck. And I don't think you want to be lucky. I think you want to be smart. So that means we need to get past the anything will do. I happen to like this little graphic. I'm willing to try something new instead of following the crowd. How about you? So are we ready for a change management model and a strategy? What's a change map or a change management strategy? Think of it this way. If we can analyze the changes you want to make and visualize them, see how the rest of your company is going to be affected by it, understand what this means for the things you're going to have to do, not simply say, but act upon, and they're all going to be watching you. You can prepare your teams in advance and help guide them through the transition until the new becomes the way we do it here. The habits are very powerful, and what people are looking to see is whether or not you can actually capture what they're doing in new ways by them mimicking you. But it's scary, and you must take a step into the unknown in order to get there. So, the times are indeed changing. Let me give you a little illustration. Imagine you and your taxes. Now, there are countries that are putting blockchain into effect so you don't have to do your taxes anymore. It's on your blockchain, it gets communicated immediately to the government. Done. Switzerland's doing this. Dubai is doing it. But right now, you and your taxes have an accountant. And I wonder about that accountant and whether or not they are doing things in a new way with all kinds of the cloud and artificial intelligence and mechanized learning, or are they doing it on paper? Remember that Watson is challenging the accounting industry through H&R Block right now, but it is going to do the taxes on artificial intelligence, and it's going to know more than perhaps you do as an accountant or as a client. And then there's a compliance automation software is the answer to rising compliance costs, from ad hoc auditing to automated monitoring. Everything in this industry is facing transformation. We had a prospective client not long ago who is really looking at their team on how to change them. A large accounting firm assembled with many acquisitions, wondering how are we going to do business? What will all our accountants do if everything gets automated? And then their clients are also changing. QuickBooks is going to be QuickBooks on Cloud, online. And then there's billing.com. And there are all kinds of other services that are going to take away the need for you to do this manually on a server in your office with a controller who's aging. Now, while they may be unsecure or uncomfortable with the lack of security or not having someone in their office, that's what's coming next. And even the clients are changing. Not to be underestimated, you can sit still, but your clients are changing and their expectations are shifting. So some of the accounting firm clients were growing older and they were looking to see whether they should merge, they should sell, they should close, cash cow it. But their relationship with the firm who provided these services was changing. There are lots of young entrepreneurs. Remember, women entrepreneurs represent now 40% of the workforce, of the businesses in America today. 40% are owned and run by women. That's up enormously since 2008, and it's a really transformative time. How are they going to handle those? Well-established firms were actually breaking apart. And staff were growing older inside those companies of their clients. And sometimes their controllers or bookkeepers or financial people were going to retire. Who will they replace them with? And the next generation in many family firms was taking over and had very different ideas about how to run the business. Inside the firm, could be yours, were ambitious young Gen Ys, well-trained, with very different personalities than the boomers who formed the company, and different ways to interact, and in some cases having difficult times in-person interaction, much happier when they were doing it on their cell phone and text messaging. And then we have the new economy. This new economy is a gig economy. Exactly what gig means, I can't tell you. But I will tell you that 1/3 of American workers are now engaged as contract employees or freelancers. And those who I've met and interviewed are really happy. They don't have to worry about HR. They don't have to worry about showing up all the time. They can do it their way. And they found that there's such a shortage of talent today that they're in high demand. 4 in 10 Americans by 2020 will be engaged in quick gigs. And this is a very big area for a gig economy, which means that a firm can hire on demand and be much more flexible with contract workers and others. Now, the organization itself really wanted to see itself in new ways. Partners wanted to retire or ensure they could. Managers loved working remotely, couldn't they? But their staff needed to learn from them and bond with them and needed to have questions answered from them. How could they do that best? And then the rigid rules of before felt awkward now, but maybe they needed more controls. They weren't quite sure how they were changing, but you had the boomers on the one side, the Gen Xers in the middle, and you had the Gen Ys here, and everything was changing. And so there are lots of things on top of which they did some really good archetype stuff and culture change stuff to find out who they were and how we were going to change. So those of you who have taken the OCAI ahead of time, if not, I recommend you look up ocai-online.com and take the survey. For this particular situation, we had them take it, and they came up with great graphs that reflected the culture of today and what they would prefer to be. For this one, the red is today and the blue is tomorrow. Today, they're highly hierarchical with some clan, little innovation, not even much focus on building the market. But the adhocracy is a very creative, innovative kind of culture. And a market one is one where you're competing and achieving great results. So I'll show you some of these quite quickly to show you how different people within the organization had very different models. This one is pretty balanced around the center. They were partially interested in more clan and a little bit less of the hierarchy and a lot more of adhocracy, but not too much. And here, this was one person who really wanted to get rid of all the controls and really get much more creative and results oriented. Here's one who moved out slightly, but still had a nice balance around the center. You can see the numbers on the right here. The adhocracy went from 8 to 20. That's a very big leap. And hierarchy went from 48 to 28. Equally big leap. Those are dramatic changes in the way we do things here. Here, we had one that was much more balanced to start and moved over a little bit, not as far as the others. This was very dramatic. All of them were telling us that it was time to change the culture. They wanted less controls and directives. They wanted more to be self-managed, very entrepreneurial and able to take risks, and much better at getting the results and being competitors in the marketplace. A little more collaboration would be helpful too. The future leader was far more innovative, empowering than perhaps his staff could embrace, but they too were moving in that direction. And they knew they had to change just from looking at their own OCAI. Now, there was one freewheeling, high-performing person who had to have some rules put into place to channel her energy or someone to complement her. Things that we learn is you don't want to have a country club where everybody is just happy getting along. And you really don't want to have just a chaotic free-for-all as an entrepreneur. You needed some rules. You didn't want to be a post office waiting for everyone to tell you what to do with high rigor every day. And then on the other side, you didn't want to be a commodities trader like we work with, where everything was about making money with no collaboration or even conversation. So this led to a change management strategy on many levels. How do we rebrand them? What kind of new services? What kind of changing expectations of employees? How do you use outsourced solutions, skill development initiatives, new clients coming on, and a lot of skill development and redesign of roles? I cannot emphasize enough, you can't simply say we want to become more self-managed, we want more risk-taking. Nobody knows what those words mean. How much do you want? We want to be more collaborative. How shall we do that? We worked with one healthcare system who wanted to have much more innovation, but they had 9 unions. It was hard to know what they wanted to be innovative with. So, since we don't hate change, we hate to be changed, what do we do about it? Let's talk about the challenge. First, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. Remember, we are born half-cooked, and we spend pretty much the first 30 years of our lives developing a mind map. That mind map is extremely important because it creates a perception of reality, perhaps like the big lion, and you only see the stuff that conforms to it. So it's very interesting that you see yourself one way, regardless of how you actually are. The second thing is that we are herd animals. We like others, like ourselves. The birds of a feather flock together. And we're most comfortable when we're with others who share the same values, beliefs, dress the same similarly, and share the same kind of beer that we like when we go out. The third point is that we are full of well-honed habits. The brain uses 25% of the body's energy. We don't have a lot of energy there for new things. It's actually quite miserly when it comes to learning new things. It doesn't like new things. We like to follow the habits. So even when we say, I have to change, I'm going to go on Weight Watchers and change my diet, man, the habits take over and that cookie comes out and that ice cream is good and you can't stay on the program. Most important, your brain hates me. It doesn't want to change. It doesn't want to learn new things. It literally creates pain. Chemicals saying, stop. I don't need to learn this. So what are we going to do? Lots of good neuroscience research coming out telling us. First is this, we're mimics, we're monkeys. We don't like to be outliers or sit alone. So I will change my mind and my behaviors if I see others, particularly leaders, colleagues, and staff, particularly those who I respect and honor, behaving differently. This is an important slide because people mirror each other unconsciously. We are truly birds of a feather flocking together. What they do, I do, and that makes me safe and feel comfortable that I know what I'm doing. It helps us bond. Second, I'm going to change my mind and behaviors if I understand what is being asked of me and it makes sense. This whole business of telling people why we're doing it isn't simply to tell them, it's to help them see the story in a different way. Remember, they have a story in their head, and it sorts reality. And they're seeking congruence between what they believe and what they have to change. This whole issue of why are we doing this matters a lot. And often they will say, yes, I understand, but you've got to get them involved in understanding how to change this. This is very much like a performance. Next, I'll change my mind and my behaviors if you develop my talent and skills. Old dogs can learn new tricks, but you have to invest in them and show them that what you're teaching them matters, because if not, they'll go through the course you send them to and nothing will happen. So this isn't about learning something, this is about doing something. And they will do it if you invest in them. And most important, they will change their mind and their behaviors, particularly their behaviors, if you change the organization's structures. So whatever you used to do, take a good look at it and think about, is this the way we're going to do it in the new organization? You're instituting artificial intelligence for a whole lot of processes. What else is happening or changing? The way you do things has to begin to actually change, as if you're on stage playing a whole new performance of a whole new play. The rewards and recognition have to change. And the way you celebrate, the symbols associated with it. Humans are symbol creating people. They tell stories. And if you don't tell them the right story so they can repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, they will make one up. And you'll be amazed at their creativity. Why is this so challenging? Because it isn't simply what we do all day. It's the essence of a person. It's their archetype. Are they a lover, an outlaw? Are they a jester or a rebel? What kind of person are they, and what do you want them to become? It's not a task to be done. It's embedded in the culture that they share. So for many of you, I asked you to take the OCAI, and I want to talk about culture so that you can understand how we're going to go about changing it. Culture is the way you think, act, and interact. It's everything. What is your company's culture? There are 4 dominant types of culture that came out of excellent research out of the University of Michigan. Dr. Kim Cameron and Dr. Robert Quinn have a great deal of research published. One is Diagnosing and Changing Organizational Culture, well worth a read. I'm a consultant for the firm in the Netherlands that has their survey as a license, and the one I told you to take, the OCAI-online.com, is an excellent way for you to assess your own organization's culture, how it is today and what you would like it to be. But there are 4 dominant types, and they are at odds with each other and to some degree. So the adhocracy, think of this as entrepreneurs. They are creative, empowered, visionary, willing to take a stand. I find myself as an explorer very much happy in an adhocracy. We're entrepreneurs. So you begin to see there's a relationship between who you are as an archetype and the kind of culture you embrace. On the other side is a hierarchical, controlling culture. I'm not happy in a controlling culture. I'm an explorer. But I bet there are people who are rulers who are very happy there, or every man who's very happy with the order that comes from being in a structure. I sometimes think of this as a bank or a post office, pretty well organized with good rules that people adhere to comfortably. The habits take over. They are at odds with each other. Now remember, too much creativity. I've taught entrepreneurship at Washington University in St. Louis. Entrepreneurs who don't have any structure don't get anything done. They have an idea a minute. And structures without any ideas don't go very far. Then on the other 2 axes here, the clans are very collaborative, very people-oriented. Family firms are very clannish. When I spoke at the Family Firm Institute, and I did this with them, family firms were off the charts. The problem was that they didn't compete very well. Very often they were so worried about having the family protected. One family firm I interviewed had 49 family members. Tough. The competition on the other side, though, is market-driven, looking for results. The commodities trader I worked with were off the charts as a market competitor, but didn't get along very well. Didn't really collaborate at all. And creativity, not much. The best managers are around the center. They know how to encourage empowerment, risk-taking, and ideas, but they know how to give it a process. Many of the women CEOs that I've been interviewing for my next book are just like that. And then they know how to go after the market and compete there, but they also know how to team up and get it done together. So, what was your profile? This is one where you can see there's a nice move toward adhocracy and a decline in hierarchy, but pretty much the same in market and clan. When you look at yours, remember that each type of culture has helped us adapt. Even the evolution of your own company. Entrepreneurs learn early on that at some point they're going to have to put more rules into place, even hire an HR person. And family firms know at some point they have to compete, innovate, or they're not going to have anybody inherit the firm. Successful firms have a bunch of things in common. They have strong cultures that reduce uncertainties. People don't like ambiguity. They create a social order so people know what to expect. They create continuity and key values and norms. And they create a collective identity and a commitment. It expresses a vision of the future and energizes forward movement. Now, let me say this all again. When you have a strong, successful culture, the way we do things here, reduce the uncertainty so people come to work every day. They know what to expect by and large. They have meetings at similar times. They have values and norms that they share and believe to be valuable. They're part of the archetype. So if you're a Nike, they're all heroes, right? And if you're IKEA, I mean, they are all part of every man. Who are you? And what is your culture today? Because the wrong culture will take you down the wrong road. Culture eats everything. That comment, culture eats strategy for breakfast and lunch. It doesn't matter what. The culture will undermine whatever you're trying to do in the world of both today and change. Organizational culture, like humans, hate to change. The way we do things, they are so strong that they are comfortable. They are the essence of who you are. It has the continuity and consistency that you need. And you have a strong sense of consensual values. Somebody said to me in a podcast that I was being interviewed for, I thought anthropologists only study small-scale societies. Trust me, businesses are small-scale societies, and their cultures are strong, they are empowering, and they're also limiting. But you can, in fact, create a culture that fosters adaptability. Set of principles to follow when designing strategies to deal with new situations. Think about why you're watching this. You want to know how to change. Well, if your culture enables you to see things with fresh eyes and then to put processes in place to do them, you can adapt. Innovative companies are innovative. Take a look at Menlo Innovations in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It has a company with no managers. They even have IT anthropologists working with customers. And their computer programmers do an exceptional job of delivering exceptional services to their clients on time, under budget, and with great results, very innovatively. So they have lots of methods for testing prototypes, approaches to engaging around new methods. They see these as part of the way they do things. Remember, however, regardless of what you're doing and how you want to change, cultures are shared across the organization. And that's very important for you to remember. Now, let's step back for a moment. You want to change, and you need a change management strategy. You're going to have to think about your archetype, your culture, and how it's going to be very challenging to change it. It's going to hurt. People are going to say things and not do things. They're going to say things and not give you a date by which they will do it. And remember, most successful people give you a date, a time, a place, and do it. Those who just say the things they're going to do without a time and a place don't. It's very interesting to watch people actually change. So, what do you want your staff to do more of? There's some excellent exercises. We won't talk about them today, but very simply, a very big chart that says, what will we do more of and less of? It's a great way to begin to see how you're going to change. And there's another one I like. What will we stop, start, and never change? What's sacred? You need to begin to take your team through the process together so they will know what's important here. How do you do it? Let's create a change map strategy to manage change. Why not? This is very important for you. This is important because it is a well-documented research that I think is just extraordinary. You can read it. It's called How to Have Influence. It's out of MIT Sloan Management Review, done by Vital Smarts. And I do think you'll find it very much into the process that we're talking about here. And I want to go back and take you through each of them, the steps, but let me tell you the story from an overview perspective. They did research on 1,000 different companies. And what they found is that successful companies who can implement change do at least 4 of these things. Not 1 or 2, but 4. They don't just change the rewards or the payments or the reimbursements for their staff or their income. And they don't just change the symbols that they have. And they just don't give them some training and say, do it. They do 6 things really well, at least 4 of them. On the motivation side, this isn't about a new vision. This is about making something that people have not done, undesirable things, very desirable. And in order to begin that process, they must visualize that. Then they have to take their teams and give them the skills so that they can actually implement those undesirables, now desirables. When we worked with a hospital, they wanted to be more innovative. I realized they didn't know how to be innovative. Nobody was allowed to take risk. They followed the rules. With 9 unions, it was not easy to implement innovation. But they began a process of trying small wins to see how they could do it. And we worked on skill development so they saw how to be innovative, how to embrace a little risk. Then the social part. How do you harness peer pressure? People will do what others are doing. That's what we said. I can change if I see others doing the same. So now we have to have peer pressure and look at who the underlying objectives are going to be. Turn them into leaders of the process. Don't let them abort yours. And the social support comes in a variety of ways. Mentors are very important. Coaches are as well. But the managers should be key to that mentoring. Because if they can't help the skill building and the peer development, then they're not good managers. I read about a bank once which realized that their managers weren't investing in their own retirement savings plans. So how were they going to sell it? So they taught them all about the savings plans and why it was the best place to invest. They got them to actually use it. And then they got them to teach the other managers about why and how. Little like the medical, they saw one, did one, and taught one. But it's in that manager who's enabling others to do it that it becomes so real. And then you can align the rewards, assure accountability, and change the environment. Let's go into this a little deeper. First, you're trying to make the undesirable desirable. This is not about finding new people, although at times you may have to. This is about changing how people see, feel, and think, and then do. Remember, we buy with the heart. I got to see it to realize experientially what it is that we're seeing. And then my head takes over and begins to think about it and draws up a new story and can tell you about the story. This new story can be shared and lived. The sharing part is extremely important. And often we'll sit down with a client going through this and ask them to tell us a story about how they would like to make this new undesirable desirable. And when you have 5 different stories, you know the next part is, I need a new one. What's the new story? How are we going to share it? How do we build it together? It's extremely important to get your team to build a new story together so they begin to internalize it, concretize it, share it, and begin to tell stories about the story. Now, skill development. Often people say, well, we'll send them off to a course. Nope. This is about learning a whole new performance, how to play a new role. And nobody can do it simply by attending somewhere else. It goes on inside the organization. And so you need constant new training every 3 weeks, every 2 weeks, with then coaching that follows it. Because that way they can learn it, do it, and begin to see that they are doing it better. And so can you see that they are changing. Now, the whys matter. When people know why change is necessary, they stop resisting. They typically are trying to be good. But if they can't explain to a husband or friend or somebody else about why they are changing their job and why they've got a new office and they are now doing new tasks, they can't really believe that it's important. And you haven't told them why. This is very much about their self-esteem and your respect for them. Now, it's extremely important to create readiness for this. Expect resistance to change. Usually there are 4 hurdles. The first one is I don't understand what you're talking about, the cognitive hurdle. The second one is I really am not motivated. The third one is I haven't got the resources. And the fourth one is politically it's unpopular. So your job is to think about those 4 and get them ready to change. It may be essential because you have to tell them about why not changing has tremendous impact for them, not just for the company. Now, once you got that going, it's time to get some small wins under your belt. This business of having them tell you a story about how it will be different when it's changed is not to be underestimated. And then you need a small win to show them how you got it done. You have to celebrate when they do it, but make them in 2-week sessions, 3-week, 4-week sessions, fast enough so they can focus. Don't make it seem like it's someday, because that will never happen. And practice is extremely powerful. So let them fail a couple of times and keep learning, but keep making the wins small and frequent. Now, this is extremely important. Make sure you have the peer pressure using the processes, design the follow-up and accountability, specify timeframes for the changes, design follow-up and reporting events. Don't let change be someday. Make it tomorrow or the next day or whenever is the right day, but then hold them accountable to reach it. And don't underestimate the ability to find the wrong day to do it, like never. So you need to be very accountable to them and them to you. Now, remember this is all visualization. Over-communicate visually. Draw lots of pictures. Show them on paper how it's working. Get all kinds of ways of visualizing it with videos. Talk to them about the joy that you see happening as people are changing the way they get along. Maybe what you're trying to do, I have this often happen in clients, they want to get rid of the silos. The silos are real impediments to being more efficient. I work with a cement company in Mexico. They had great silos, but they couldn't hire anybody because nobody wanted to work in a very hierarchical, siloed company. They wanted more teamwork and collaboration. So changing the silos was urgent, but they had to see what that actually looked like over and over again. You can too. Now, align the right measures of success. Measures. Measures are extremely important. Data is very important, or people will see what's happening but not know if it's better or worse. So you need to define the gathering system and a time frame for assessing results and send it out often, but make sure the data has a story around it. Don't just send charts. You need to tell the story and use the data to support it. It's not about the data, it's about the story. Now, often there's something very important that you want to stop, but people can't seem to give it up. Have a funeral. Literally, take all of the things that are going on that you want to stop and have an event. What it does is recognize that this was important once before and you recognized and valued it, but no longer will it be important to do this. I had one company who couldn't get rid of all the paper they were producing, even though everything had become automated. That was real interesting. Getting rid of the paper was a ceremony of transition, and it got rid of all the paper, all the copiers, everything. It was very cool. Now, symbols. Symbolic changes capture the essence of it. It's shorthand. It also allows people to feel things together. This together feeling builds new bonds. So if you're breaking down your silos, this is a great way for them to begin to really enjoy each other, as if they're playing on the same soccer team. The symbols signifying a new culture have to be intentional, though, because like humans, if you don't, they will make it up for you. Help them rally around the new. We had a client and they were trying to match their people who were supporting clients with clients. They went out and met with the clients and they listened to their stories. They came in and they listened to their staff and listened to the stories. And it was as if the two were disconnected. And so they needed to symbolically connect them so they told the same story. The client thought of the staff the same way the staff thought of the client. Everything is symbolic, meaningful. Out of context, there's no value or meaning to it, though. So make sure it's in the context that matters. Now, this is not a gig. You're not just changing some stuff for the heck of it. You're not going to just simply get rid of the lunch you serve today for other ones tomorrow. The people are comfortable in their culture now. They love it even when they know it's broken. They will get frustrated. They'll do go-arounds. They'll ignore your policies. But change is more painful than doing things that are broken. So now is a good time for a change map strategy. What does that mean? Let's do your own change map. Change is a process you can do. We've sort of mapped it out here. It starts on the left, where you're going to visualize the future. You're going to make that undesirable desirable. You're going to train, develop, and explain the power of why. And you're going to over-explain it. You're going to plan small wins to learn and test results. You're going to harness the power of peer pressure and find those informal leaders who are going to really tell the story, and you're going to engage them in the process. Communication, over-communicate, and celebrate. Hold a funeral to say goodbye to past practices, but think about the symbolic power of this. And metrics, but not by sending out graphs, but telling new stories with new data. If you're watching this, I'm going to take you through this very quickly, and now you can do this on your own. You're going to start with writing a short story about something you want to change. And then you're going to tell us why this is so important. Write 3 big bullets and how you're going to build the skills around them. Now, you're going to start with what the small wins are going to be. Can you show people what this change looks like? Let's imagine a small win. Let them imagine it with you. Then identify key individuals who must rise to lead this. Who are they and why are they so important? How are you going to engage them? How are they going to be leaders in a process of change? What kind of skills do they need to have? How are you going to over-communicate and celebrate? And what might need a funeral to put it to rest so that you never see it happen again? And people realize that we are really moving in a new direction. How will you know it's working? Those metrics are critically important, but pick the right ones and then tell stories with them. Don't give people the graphs. I've seen it happen too often. They give them a deck of information and they hope it tells a story to someone somehow. The 8 core principles that I urge you to follow. First, clearly define your change and map it out. You're making the undesirable desirable is essential. Keep your language simple. Try to stay away from abstractions. Get concrete, lots of illustrations. Start at the top. People will be watching. I worked with one company and the CEO hired me, and for 3 months he did nothing different. Told me to change the people down below. Finally, I said, I quit. Unless you're going to change, they will not. They are watching. They're monkeys and mimic you. And if you're going to do things exactly the same way you always have, they will too. They don't trust that the changes will be recognized. And you haven't defined for them what really matters in the new world that you're creating. Teach the front lines. If you only teach the front lines, you'll have problems. If you don't teach them, you will have problems. This is culture change at the most essential part. Then understand and use your culture. What kind of archetype is it? Is it going to change to a different kind of archetype? Or are you going to keep the same archetype but do things differently to implement it? These are serious questions you must ask and focus on. Tie the changes to a strategic and emotional benefits. People buy with their hearts. They also feel whether it's good or not. Celebration matters, but what's your strategy? What's the benefit here? It's not just to be different. It's not just to mimic another company. What's going on? Now, encourage behavior, not just ideas. People will often tell you what they think you want to hear and then go back and do what the habits tell them is what we do. And they won't even notice the difference. Now, and support your changes with a formal framework. Don't imagine it. You have to do it. Make it come alive. And have fun. This is really what it's all about. Can you have fun? Because that's where it's all at. And if you laugh a lot, you will find people enjoying the process of change and not simply resisting it. Thank you for joining our webinar today. It's been a pleasure. Send us your questions to Simon@simonassociates.net. You can learn more about us at simonassociates.net or andysimon.com. And I put on some reading as well as our podcast. We do a whole lot of interviews on the podcast about change and change management. So take a look at it at andysimon.com/podcast, and you'll find all kinds of things there. We write extensive blogs and white papers. Our job is to help you do yours. And so we look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar.